Welcome to the deep dive, everybody. Today we're going to take a deep dive into the life of Walt Disney. I mean, everyone knows his name, but how well do we really know the man behind the mouse?
Right. I mean, Mickey Mouse, Disneyland, the whole Disney empire. But who was Walt Disney, really? We're using Neil Gabler's biography to sort of unpack all that. And let me tell you, it's a pretty amazing story, way more complex than you might think.
Yeah, and it's a big book, so we're only going to hit the highlights, but I think we can still get a pretty clear picture of the man. The book starts with his childhood in Kansas City. Not exactly the happiest of beginnings.
Yeah, not a fairy tale start, that's for sure. But there's this interesting thing, right? Walt kind of played up the whole poor kid made good story. It's like he almost exaggerated the hardships to make his success seem even more impressive.
Oh, interesting. So it wasn't just about being honest, it was about crafting a narrative.
It seems like it, yeah. This idea of overcoming adversity becomes a huge theme in his work. You can see it everywhere in those classic Disney films. It's almost like a personal mythology he was building.
Huh. Like how Cinderella escapes her awful stepmother. Or Pinocchio, wanting to be a real boy.
Exactly. The underdog always wins. Good triumphs over evil. Those are classic Walt Disney themes, and they really echo his own self-made story.
Okay, so there's this whole layer of personal meaning baked into his work that I don't think a lot of people realize.
Definitely. And then you have Marceline, Missouri.
Oh yeah, the book talks about that. It seems like a really important place for him, almost mythical.
It was. He only lived there for a few years as a child, but he always looked back on it as this perfect, idyllic time. Like it was the foundation of everything.
A simpler time.
Exactly. You
Yeah.
can see that longing for a simpler time, a connection to nature in a lot of his films. Those beautiful pastoral settings in Bambi or Snow White, you know.
Yeah, I can totally see that.
It's like Marceline became this visual shorthand for innocence and wonder, something he spent his whole life trying to recapture.
And that makes sense, right? I mean, if your work is about creating these magical worlds, it makes sense that you'd draw inspiration from a place that felt magical to you.
Right. And it wasn't just the landscapes. He really valued that small town sense of community, which also shows up in his films.
Okay, so we've got this difficult childhood, this idyllic memory of Marceline, and then there's this other side of him, the showman. The book talks about how much he loved performing, even as a kid.
Oh, yeah, he was always putting on shows. He had this Dutch comedian act. Can you believe it?
I read that. Was he always like that? Always so driven to entertain?
It seems like it was just part of who he was, although the book does mention he wasn't the most focused student.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I would have guessed he was a straight-A student.
Nope, not quite. Some teachers described him as sleepy and preoccupied in class. Sounds familiar.
Uh-huh. Yeah, maybe a little. So maybe not a perfect student, but definitely always a performer at heart. Then World War I happened. He was just a teenager, but he really wanted to enlist.
He did, yeah. He even tried to fake his age to join up, but they caught him.
Wow, so determined.
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
He eventually made it to France as an ambulance driver with the Red Cross, but the war ended just as he got there.
Ugh, that's got to be frustrating. To go through all that effort and then miss out on the action?
He was definitely bummed. He later said he felt like he missed out on something big.
Yeah, I can imagine. But it seems like even though he missed out on the actual fighting, the whole experience really fueled his ambition.
Oh, yeah. It really solidified his drive to make a mark on the world. And when he got back to Kansas City, he channeled that energy into animation. That's when Newman Laugh-O-Grams comes in.
Right, his first animation studio. It seems like he was really going for it, even then.
Oh, he was all in, incredibly driven, but maybe, a little too eager.
Oh, so.
Well, the book says he often underpriced his work. He was so desperate to get any deal that he'd practically give his animations away.
So a brilliant artist, but not the best businessman.
Not yet, anyway. He was learning on the job, making mistakes, but he was always moving forward. That passion was undeniable.
And eventually that passion leads him to Hollywood. That's a big leap.
Huge leap. And he's not alone. He teams up with his brother Roy, and they start Disney Bros. Studio.
Talk about a dynamic duo. The creative genius and the savvy businessman.
Exactly. That partnership with Roy is key to the whole Disney story. Roy handled the business side, kept things running smoothly, especially in those early years, gave Walt the freedom to be creative. And it's during this time they come up with Oswald the Lucky Rabbit.
Oh, yeah, the one before Mickey.
The one and only. And that story actually has a pretty dark turn.
What do you mean?
Well, Walt loses the rights to Oswald in a contract dispute.
No way.
Yeah, it was a huge blow. He poured his heart into that character, and then, poof, Someone else owns him.
I bet that was a tough lesson.
Oh, definitely. But it also lit a fire under him. He realized he needed to create a character he owned outright. And that's how Mickey Mouse was born.
So Mickey Mouse was born out of necessity, but also out of this desire for control.
Exactly. And that control, that ownership was really important to Walt. It allowed him to shape Mickey's image, his story, his entire world.
But before Mickey completely takes over the world, there's this whole period where Walt is experimenting, trying different things, like the Alice comedies.
Right, those were interesting. Live action mixed with animation. Not exactly Disney classics, but they show how he was constantly learning, evolving his style.
So even Walt Disney, the guy who practically invented modern animation, had to go through a phase of finding his voice.
Absolutely. He was borrowing ideas from other cartoons, trying things out, seeing what worked. Even a genius has to start somewhere.
That's a good reminder for all of us, isn't it?
Yeah.
Even the greats had to figure things out as they went along.
Exactly. And it's that willingness to experiment, to push boundaries, that ultimately leads to his greatest creation, Mickey Mouse.
The mouse that changed everything.
And that's where we'll pick up next time on the deep dive. I mean, Mickey Mouse. Talk about an instant sensation. Everybody loved him.
I know, it's kind of hard to imagine a world without Mickey. But the book talks about how he's been interpreted in so many different ways over the years. And every man, a symbol of hope, even a reflection of modern anxieties.
Yeah, it's fascinating, right? It's like Mickey became this blank slate that each generation could project their own hopes and fears onto. Early on, he was this plucky, optimistic figure, really embodied that American can-do spirit.
Right, right. But as things got more complicated, Mickey did too.
Exactly. He became more complex, more nuanced. He became a way to explore those bigger questions about society, about ourselves. And that's probably why he's still relevant today.
Yeah, because he's not just stuck in time. He keeps evolving. But one thing that really helped launch him into superstardom was the decision to add sound to animation.
Steamboat Willie, oh man, total game changer.
It's funny, though, because Walt was actually kind of hesitant about sound at first.
Yeah.
He thought it would distract from the artistry of the animation.
He did, yeah. It's interesting how sometimes even the most visionary people can be resistant to change. But thankfully, he was open to experimenting. He took a chance, and it paid off big time.
Big time. Steamboat Willie was a smash hit. It wasn't just about the novelty of sound, it was about how Walt used it to tell stories in a whole new way.
Exactly. It added so much to the humor, the emotion, the whole experience. Suddenly, cartoons weren't just silent moving pictures, they were alive.
And that success, I mean, it really allowed Walt to build his empire. He could hire more people, create bigger projects, take more risks.
Oh, absolutely. Steamboat Willie was like this launch pad for everything that came after. But all that success, all that pressure, it seemed to have an effect on Walt personally. The book talks about how he became much more demanding, a real perfectionist.
Yeah, the demanding genius stereotype.
Right, and there's definitely truth to that. I mean, he had insanely high standards. He pushed himself and everyone around him to their limits.
It's not always in the nicest way, I'm guessing.
No, not always. There's stories about him being, harsh, critical, even explosive at times. But it's important to remember that he was also incredibly hard on himself.
Yeah, like that pressure was coming from inside as much as outside.
Exactly. He had this vision in his head, and he wouldn't settle for anything less. And while that made him difficult at times, it also fueled his creativity. I mean, think about the innovations he came up with during this period. Pencil tests, Leica reels.
Oh yeah, those were huge.
Yeah.
But I gotta admit, I'm not exactly sure how those worked.
Well, pencil tests, they were like rough drafts of the animation. The animators could sketch out the movements, see how it flowed before committing to the final drawings. It allowed for so much more refinement, and it saved a ton of time and money.
So, like trial and error, but on paper.
Exactly. And the Leica reels, those were amazing. They used this modified Leica camera to actually film the animation cells. So for the first time, animators could see their work in motion with proper timing and pacing.
Wow, I can only imagine how much that improved the quality of the animation.
It was a revolution. It allowed for this fluidity, this expressiveness that hadn't been possible before. And combined with Walt's focus on personality animation, I mean, it really led to the creation of some of the most memorable characters of all time. Pluto, the three little pigs, I mean, these weren't just moving drawings anymore. They were characters with heart, with soul.
That's the Disney magic, right? Making you care about these drawings,
Yeah.
making you feel something.
Absolutely. And then comes Snow White, the big one, the one that almost broke him.
Yeah, the book really emphasizes how risky that project was, a feature-length animated film. No one had ever done that before.
Right. Everyone thought he was crazy, including a lot of people at his own studio. It was so ambitious, so expensive, it could have been a disaster.
But of course, we know how the story ends.
Snow White was a phenomenon. It made history. It changed everything.
It's incredible to think that a film about a princess and seven dwarfs could have that much impact.
But it wasn't just a fairy tale. It was a technical marvel, a storytelling triumph. It proved that animation could be a serious art form, capable of rivaling live-action films.
And it gave Disney the resources to really expand, to build their own studio lot, to become a major Hollywood player. But even with all that success, it seems like Walt's personal demons didn't go away.
No, the anxieties, the perfectionism, it was all still there. And maybe it even got amplified by the pressure of success.
So the classic story of the driven artist who achieves incredible things but never quite finds peace.
Yeah, something like that. And that internal conflict seems to push him in new directions. He starts exploring live-action films. He develops Disneyland. He even starts dreaming up EPI, his vision for a futuristic city.
It's like he could never stand still. He always had to be pushing boundaries, trying new things. Was it restlessness or ambition? Maybe a bit of both.
I think it was all those things. He had this incredible energy, this desire to create, to innovate, to leave his mark on the world. And you see that in everything he did. Disneyland, for example, was revolutionary. It wasn't just an amusement park. It was a whole new kind of entertainment experience. And EPIT, that was even more ambitious. It was his attempt to design a better future, a model for how cities could be more livable, more sustainable.
But the book also points out that Walt was very much a man of his time. His views on things like race and gender, they reflect the attitudes of that era, which haven't exactly aged well.
That's true, and he faced a lot of criticism for that, especially later in his career, for promoting a very idealized, some would say sanitized, version of the world.
It's a tough one, right? Because on one hand, you have this visionary who created so much joy, so much wonder. But on the other hand, you have to acknowledge those problematic aspects of his work, those blind spots.
I think it's about recognizing the complexities. We can appreciate his genius, his innovation, without condoning those parts of his legacy that are, outdated or offensive. It's about having a nuanced perspective, understanding the historical context, and engaging in honest conversations about those difficult parts.
Yeah, because history is rarely black and white. And speaking of complexity, one thing that really surprised me in the book was Walt's obsession with model trains.
Oh, yeah, the trains. It wasn't just a hobby for him. It was a full-blown passion.
He had a whole miniature railroad in his backyard, right?
Yeah, like a full-scale operation. He'd spend hours out there tinkering with locomotives, laying track, building elaborate landscapes. It's kind of funny, right? This guy who creates these fantastic, larger-than-life worlds, and then he goes home and plays with toy trains.
I guess everyone needs an escape, right?
Yeah.
Even Walt Disney. But even in his hobby, you can see that same attention to detail, that same drive for perfection that you see in his films.
Absolutely. It's like whether he was creating an animated world or building a miniature railroad, he couldn't help but pour his heart and soul into it.
It's funny you mention that because the book also talks about Walt's fascination with cryogenics, like the idea of freezing yourself to be revived in the future.
Oh, yeah, that whole myth that he had himself frozen. It's not true, of course, but I guess it kind of makes sense that people would believe it.
It does, right?
Yeah.
I mean, this is a guy who never seemed to want to stop, to slow down. Even death wasn't going to stop him. At least that's the idea.
Right, and it kind of fits with this whole image of him as this larger-than-life figure, this relentless innovator. Like, he just couldn't fathom the idea of his story ending.
That's a good point. But even without cryogenics, his legacy is pretty much assured, right? I mean, Mickey Mouse, Disneyland, all of it, it's not going away anytime soon.
No, not at all. His characters, his stories, they're woven into the fabric of our culture. He really did change the world.
So I guess the big question is, after reading this biography, after going deep into his life, how do we sum up Walt Disney? I mean, he was obviously a genius, a visionary, but he was also a real person with flaws and contradictions.
Yeah, I think that's the key takeaway here. He wasn't just this cartoon character come to life. He was complicated, driven, ambitious, and sometimes really difficult.
And it's important to acknowledge both sides of that, right? The good and the bad, the magic and the not so magical.
Definitely. I think the best way to understand him is to embrace that complexity, to see him as a product of his time with all the good and bad that comes with that, but also to recognize his incredible impact, his lasting legacy.
Yeah, because there's no denying that he changed the world of entertainment. He gave us characters that we love, stories that stay with us, and experiences that continue to inspire and delight.
Absolutely. And I think that's what we should focus on, the joy he brought to so many people, the way he sparked our imaginations, the way he made us believe in the power of dreams.
And I think that's a great place to wrap things up. So, to all you deep divers out there, keep dreaming big, keep pushing boundaries, and remember, even a mouse can change the world.